That night, I stood beside Mira's bed as she slept with an old stuffed toy tucked close to her chest. I stayed there for a long moment, and the same question quietly returned to my mind. Was I giving her enough? Not just food or clothes, but a childhood that would stay with her when she grows up. Sometimes that fear arrives for no clear reason. The house is quiet, the bills are paid, and everything seems completely fine. Yet, those quiet moments are often when I begin comparing our life with the families I see every day. Little by little, I start feeling as though we're falling behind. My name is Clara, and I'm a mother. One of the fears I quietly carry every day is that my children might one day feel they had less because of what we couldn't provide. Myra handed me a brochure for an after-school program that immediately caught her attention. I noticed the fee before I looked at anything else. I read the brochure again and again before quietly checking this month's budget. The numbers still refused to fit together. Myra couldn't hide how excited she was. I smiled back while my thoughts quietly started racing ahead. At the supermarket, we walked past a small toy shelf. Mira only looked for a moment and kept walking without asking. I wondered if she stayed quiet because she'd heard maybe later too many times before. That thought lingered longer than I expected. While making dinner, I noticed another family enjoying a beach vacation on my phone. Their children laughed together by the water. I turned the screen off, but the feeling stayed with me. I couldn't stop wondering if I still wasn't giving enough. At first, I assumed every mother probably felt this way. Maybe this was simply part of being a parent. But the more I compared my life to others, the heavier my thoughts became each night. Those quiet evenings started feeling different. I started noticing the same pattern again and again. Every time I opened social media or listened to someone else's story, the feeling returned. Somehow, I always came home with the same conclusion in my mind. We didn't have enough. Even though no one had actually said that, no one was judging our family. I was the one doing it to myself. I had quietly become my own harshest judge. And without realizing it, I had started measuring my love as a mother with numbers. That thought stayed with me longer than I expected. One afternoon, Mira turned an old cardboard box into a little house in the living room. She stayed completely absorbed in her own imagination. She looked genuinely happy. Meanwhile, I found myself thinking about the toys I still couldn't afford to buy. Then I noticed something that felt strangely true. My child was enjoying her day while I kept thinking about everything she didn't have. The longer I stayed with those thoughts, the heavier the guilt became. I couldn't explain exactly where it came from. Sometimes I imagined my children saying, "We wish our childhood had been different." That thought stayed with me longer than I wanted. Nothing like that had ever happened. Even so, I kept preparing myself for pain that might never come. Carrying thoughts that never became reality took more out of me than I expected. By the end of the day, I simply felt tired. From the outside, our life looks simple and ordinary. Our small home and shared dinners seem like enough. Armand comes home from work while Mira happily talks about her day at school. Everything around us seems perfectly fine. We still laugh together. We still joke and help each other through ordinary moments. But inside my mind, another list keeps growing. I quietly think about everything I still cannot give them. Extra lessons, family vacations, and a bigger bedroom all come to mind. Each one quietly joins the list. The list keeps getting longer. It becomes harder to notice everything we already have. I begin to feel like I'm failing at things I never even promised. That feeling quietly stays with me. One afternoon, the power suddenly went out for a little while. The house quietly slipped into darkness. Mira and I stayed in the living room together. The light from the window was all we had. We started making hand shadows on the wall. Before long, we were laughing together. After a few quiet minutes, Mira leaned against my shoulder. We stayed there without saying anything. Then she spoke in a quiet voice. "This is fun, Mom." I smiled at her. Then she added, "I like it when we play like this." For some reason, those simple words reached me deeply. They stayed with me long after the room was quiet again. That night, sleep never really came. My mind kept returning to the words Mira had said. She had never been thinking about vacations. Expensive toys were not on her mind either. She remembered only one thing. We had spent time playing together. For the first time, I quietly asked myself a difficult question. Who was the one feeling that something was missing? Was it Mira, or was it me? Maybe I had been more afraid of the world's expectations than of what my daughter truly needed. That thought stayed with me. And maybe the meaning of enough that I had been holding on to all this time was not what I believed it was. I sat quietly with that thought. The following night, I finally talked with Armand after the kids had gone to sleep. The quiet house somehow made it easier to begin. I told him honestly, I'm afraid they'll feel like they don't have enough. Saying the words out loud felt unfamiliar. Armand stayed quiet for a moment. Then he looked at me with a gentle expression. I've been afraid of that too, he said quietly. His words surprised me more than I expected. When I was a kid, the things I remember most weren't the things we owned. He spoke without rushing. I remember that my parents were always there. His voice remained calm as he said it. For the first time in a long while, I felt heard without having to explain everything. I simply sat with that feeling for a moment. We didn't suddenly become a wealthy family. There was no financial miracle waiting for us. The bills were still there. Our budget was still limited. But something did begin to change. It was the way we looked at our own life. I started paying more attention to the moments I wanted to remember, not the things we didn't have. Laughter around the dinner table, a hug before bedtime, small stories after school. Little by little, I learned to count the things money could never buy, and there were far more of them than I had ever realized. I hadn't noticed just how many until now. Some days that fear still quietly finds its way back to me. I'm still human, and some worries don't disappear overnight. Even then, I try to remember one simple thing. My children don't see a bank account the way adults do. They remember when we're there with them. They feel our love, and they notice the safety that comes with it. If this story feels familiar to you, I'd love for you to stay with us by subscribing to Clara's Family Journal. We're learning through this journey together. Before I go, there's something I'd love to ask you. What's one simple childhood memory that has stayed with you, even though it didn't cost much at all?